The lesson for December the 31st. The subject is working cooperatively. Our scripture is from Nehemiah 1 through 3. The key verse is, "So he said to them, you see the trouble we are in? Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned down. Come, let's rebuild Jerusalem's walls so that we will no longer be a disgrace." Nehemiah 2, 17 through 18.
Big projects require big work. That is an obvious truth, but sometimes we forget it. Big projects, big plans require great work. For example, I told you last month our church had moved into a new building. For over 40 years, we had an old building in an old part of the town of Woodbridge, Virginia. It's about 10 miles south of the Beltway in D.C., so 20 miles to Washington, D.C. And the church was small. We had some land we thought about building, but old part of town, the neighborhood was changing, so we decided to look for new property, found some good property, and God provided a true miracle that it was for sale. It was in a good crossroads, good location, big enough, 20 acres, and the price was reasonable. So we bought the land, and then we sold our building. We moved to a high school, and for 3 years we went back and forth to the high school. We couldn't stay every week. We had to go in on Sunday and set up for church, and then we'd take it down and put it into a truck, go and set for storage, then go back for church on Sunday. So every week we moved in and moved out, moved in and moved out. And then we built the new church, and it was big for our people. The cost was high with the land and the architect and the construction cost and all of the things. It was very expensive. Selling our property, the fees that were included, and then the time that was required, and the effort of moving and working, and all of those things just took so much work. It really was a big job, and it was a big plan and a big project. When we finally finished and we moved in, the sense still today, 1 year later, still feel this was a big project. Couldn't be accomplished by people. Couldn't be. When you figure out and say, how could you afford the building? How could you move to a high school? A First Baptist Church, never heard of in a high school, and selling a building, and why not hold the building and use until build the new building, and many things. Why do this way? And when you look at all that happened in the last 4 or 5 years, you realize this not through people. God did it. And we believe God did it. Not people, not me, not the pastor, not the deacons, not the leaders, not the finance, not the county with their rules. God did it. God provided. Now, a big project requires big work, and God is a big God. A famous Southern Baptist named Henry Blackaby. Maybe some of you have read his book, Experiencing God. It's a workbook where you fill out and you study the Bible and you learn much about God. That writer named Henry Blackaby says, when God appears, He is always God-sized. When God appears, He is always God-sized. What size is God? Big. God is always big. And so when we have a big project from God, God provides. God always meets our needs, always provides, always in a big way. Now, this is a story that shows itself in the story of Nehemiah. Nehemiah comes with Ezra as the people return to Jerusalem. They return back to Israel, the country. Nehemiah has a big job, and he knows he's going to need big help from a big God. And that's the story of Nehemiah. So let's read chapter 1, verses 1, 2, 4, and then 11. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived during the exile, and also about Jerusalem. They told me those who survived the exile are now back in the province and in great trouble and in disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down. The gates have been burned with fire. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned. I fasted. I prayed before the God of heaven. Verse 11, O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant, and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of the king. I was the cupbearer to the king. Now, Nehemiah, as a Jew, been carried away as a slave into Babylon, was a servant to the king. And while he had heard the rumors that the exiles, the slaves who had been carried away, had now come back to Israel and to Jerusalem, he begins to be excited, eager. His brothers come in to visit, and he asks them news. What's happened in Jerusalem? What's going on? People getting home. Now remember, the desire for home. We've talked about place is important, just like church place and home place. Good memories. Well, Nehemiah heard, and now the people are back home, and he's eager. Maybe he himself can go back home, and maybe people are getting there and building, and things are going. So he asked for news. And the news is not good. The people are afraid. The people all around, the enemies, can easily come in because no walls for defending Jerusalem, no gates to keep out bad people. The walls had been destroyed before during the war, and the gates had been burned. There's nothing there for defense, and the people are afraid, and the enemies are celebrating. And so Nehemiah, first thing he does is he prays. He looks to God. It says he weeps, he mourns, he's touched, he's hurt, he desires, and he prays. He prays seriously. He prays deeply for this place called Jerusalem. He prays for something to happen.